And this is what brings me to the whopper of all whoppers, where the Washington Post has the audacity to fact check Bernie Sanders as 3 Pinocchios for saying 530,000 families, or 500,000 families, I think it was, declare bankruptcy every year because of medical bills. So I thought this piece was great. As you know, the Washington Post gave Bernie Sanders 3 Pinocchios that he said over 500,000 people declare, or families declare bankruptcy due to medical debt. Bernie Sanders' campaign has called for the Washington Post to retract that. Let's take a look. Medical debt is a major driver of personal bankruptcy. This is a fact that Bernie Sanders highlights on the stump in support of his Medicare for All proposal. Sanders, who is more fond of the statistic than stories, drives home the point with a big number. 500,000 people go bankrupt every year because they cannot pay their outrageous medical bills, he said on TV recently. The Washington Post has a political fact-checking department, and the aim is admirable, to hold candidates accountable and call them out when they're playing fast and loose with the truth. But as the Post's recent check of Sanders' medical bankruptcy stat underscores, the paper's pursuit of facts can at times go off the rails. I think this is a bit generous to the Post. I wouldn't give them, it's virtuous what they try to do. The Washington Post is a propaganda mill. Let's call it what it is. The Post piece gave Sanders 3 Pinocchios for the claim on medical debt, which is the paper's shorthand for mostly false. To have earned 3 Pinocchios, we assume Bernie's claim is a real doozy, one wooden puppet short of a whopper. So what's the matter with the statistic? As it turns out, nothing much at all. Sanders' team told the Post that the Vermont senator was relying on an estimate published in a medical journal that found that 66.5% of bankruptcy filers cited either medical bills or missed work due to illness as a reason they went broke. The journal itself said this was the equivalent to about 530,000 medical bankruptcies annually. At first glance, it appears Bernie understated the problem by rounding down. The checker did an admirable thing and reached out to the author of the study, Dr. David Himmelstein, a professor of public health in the CUNY system and a lecturer at Harvard Medical School. When we asked Himmelstein whether Sanders was quoting his study accurately, the fact-check reporter said he said yes. So I don't need to read any more of this. You get the point. So what's even more remarkable about this is from the Washington Post in February of this year. A new study has found medical problems contribute to 66.5% of all bankruptcies, a rate that has mostly remained the same since before the ACA passed. The study, published in the American Journal of Public Health, found before the ACA went into effect, 65.5% of people in debt cited medical concerns contributing to bankruptcy, compared with 67.5% in the 3 years after the healthcare law was implemented. It found 530,000 families deal with bankruptcies related to illness on medical bills. Excuse me. What is this the Washington Post says? It found 530,000 families deal with bankruptcies related to medical bills? But I thought that was 3 Pinocchios. And then you have the Washington Post twisting itself into a human pretzel. This is from Glenn Kessler, who is the fact checker, who said, because Warren Gunnels, who's the senior advisor to Bernie Sanders, called out the Washington Post for saying Bernie Sanders' claim of medical bankruptcies wasn't peer-reviewed. So Glenn, the fact-checker who gave Bernie 3 Pinocchios, this is false. Article did not say it was not peer-reviewed. We quote an editor saying the editorial did not undergo the same peer-reviewed editing process as a research article, but note it used a methodology similar to what the researchers used in 2005. Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone called out this buffoonery, propaganda, and f***ery. Quote, We didn't say the article wasn't peer-reviewed. We just said it didn't undergo the same peer-reviewed editing process as a research article, despite using a methodology similar to another peer-reviewed study, has to go in the Doublespeak Hall of Fame. I mean, folks, I don't know how much more clear it has to be made. These people are propaganda merchants. This kind of propaganda is not much different than the propaganda you see out of other countries. State-run media. The Washington Post, in its own paper, cites the same exact number that Bernie Sanders put out. So the Washington Post, day to day, I've already shown you, their go-to now. They got three things going, all in the span of a week, all in the span of a few months. Try to equate Bernie Sanders with Trump. Try to compare the anger of Bernie Sanders supporters economically, which I would call justified anger, justified hurting, and also passion, with the anger of Islamophobes, anti-immigration folks, flat earthers, trickle-downers, all these people that love Trump. Try to compare that anger with that anger. They're also trying to prop up Elizabeth Warren, and they're also basically calling themselves liars. They put out that same statistic. And if you look at, let me get it up here. If you look at the Twitter of Bernie Sanders' senior advisor, Warren Gunnels, who demanded a retraction from the Washington Post for this false claim, the Washington Post refused to retract its fact-checking, accusing Bernie of lying by saying 500,000 Americans will go bankrupt this year for medical bills. The author of the study that Bernie Sanders was citing said even the 530,000 figure is an underestimate of the number of people affected by medical bankruptcies. Sad. And he puts right here the Washington Post response to the Sanders campaign request for a retraction. The campaign of Vermont Bernie Sanders has asked for a retraction on a recent fact-checker column that awarded the Democratic presidential candidate 3 Pinocchios. The campaign raised 2 points of contention, neither of which holds up. The fact checks cities. The fact check cites 2 instances in which Sanders states the medical bills cause 500,000 bankruptcies a year. To back that claim, the campaign cited a March 2019 editorial published in the American Journal of Public Health. That study did not seek to determine what causes bankruptcies, only factors that contribute to them. On this basis alone, the statements by Senator Sanders are misleading. The study found that 44% of respondents said they very much agree that the medical expenses or loss of work related to illnesses contributed to their bankruptcies. Another 22% said they somewhat agreed. By combining both groups, the study estimates that medical-related issues were a contributing factor in around 530,000 bankruptcies per year. Senator Sanders overstates that finding in his statements, which identify medical debt as the sole reason. You have got to be f***ing kidding me with this bullshit. You've got to be kidding. The dishonesty, and really what they're trying to do is pick at semantics. But guess what? The very polling that the Washington Post does, because like many other outlets, there's polls on the presidential elections, there's polls on issues that the Washington Post authors or partners with, the very polls that the Washington Post do themselves exercise in the same exact thing that Bernie Sanders was referencing. The last thing I'm going to say on this, the Washington Post wants to make Bernie Sanders and his supporters look like, a bunch of angry, radical leftists. They want to make the voters that tend to vote the most, older people, establishment people, they want to make those voters uneasy. They want to make those voters think there's something dangerous about Bernie Sanders and his supporters. And they also want to make it seem that his claims are not backed up by facts. And not only is he angry, Not only is he radical, but he's also a liar. This is part of the corporate propaganda that keeps this barbarism growing. This is part of the corporate barbarism and propaganda and theft of your money that keeps the money trickling in to the very owner of companies like the Washington Post. That would be Jeff Bezos and Amazon, who own the Washington Post. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.